Earlier today, Megyn Kelly apologized for comments she had made defending blackface Halloween costumes as long as the person was portraying a character. A character, you know, like my Halloween costume, a Botox-laden beach blonde airhead who inexplicably has a law degree. Aww.
Rosie O'Donnell announced that she is engaged to her 33-year-old girlfriend. Well, you know what they say, the couple that infuriates Donald Trump together stays together.
Transgender rights activists are protesting over a Trump administration proposal that would roll back protections for transgender people. They're the group currently protesting outside the White House. No, the other group. No, not that group. The other group. That group. Yeah, the one right there. That one. That's the one. Yeah, that one right over there.
Sears has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Great. Well, now where am I going to get my replacement parts for my VCR and my Bob Vila weed whacker?
And finally, Mitch McConnell was confronted by a small group of diners at a restaurant in Louisville, Kentucky. This is ridiculous. Why can't politicians attempting to derail democracy just eat in peace? The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, that's right. We have some Arabian Nights here. Welcome to the evening, the night of 1001 Arabian Lies. Yes, so many different ways to cover up that story in the week since the last episode of the Trump Report. I am indeed Christian Bladt, joined as always by Chelsea Galicia.
Hello.
And Tamra Brown.
Go Dodgers.
Wait a minute. All right, now that's pandering. We are supposed to be right down the middle.
Is that hate speech?
And that sounds like hate speech. We're going to need to apologize. There are some of our most loyal viewers are probably Red Sox fans.
Snowflake Red Sox fans.
They're definitely triggered at the moment. And you know what? It's funny that you say that because I was going to apologize. There were some jokes in the top of the show that probably quantify as hate speech. So my apologies. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and thanks to the whole gang for, I was going to say manning the fort while I was gone, but since it's just the two of you are here, for personing the fort. Thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely.
It was a very enjoyable show, even if somebody in the chat disagreed. But that's all right. That's all right.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're
for
here.
For engagement, not just for agreement.
One of the topics that you had on the show was the disappearance, the mysterious disappearance of, it's almost like a Hardy Boys mystery. The disappearance of the Arabian reporter. The Saudi Arabian, I guess he's still a citizen of there, but he was a resident of the United States. And, you go into the consulate in Turkey, you figure everything's going to be all right. You got your wife waiting outside, and they tell her, like, no, he left out the back. I mean, there's everything in this story in the week since you were able to talk about it is there's disguises planned for a lookalike so that they could be seen on video entering out the back. There's the report you did mention, Chelsea, that there was a bone saw in the room, which, a fist fight broke out, and before you know it, we were using the bone saw.
Hate when that happens.
Yeah, right, me too.
We've got a bone saw in here. I mean, who doesn't have a bone saw?
Well,
I've got a bone saw. You get a bone saw.
Just don't ask the cover story for where Scott is right now. But anyway, so obviously there have been a lot of different explanations coming out, and President Trump, this is a fairly bipartisan thing. You stand by your man when it's the Saudis just because of, you feel like, well, you got to have a friend. Yeah. Speaking of Aladdin, you ain't never had a friend like me. And you know what? The Crown Prince has never had a friend like Donald Trump, who's like...
Are we sponsored by Disney now?
We should be, by the way. What's the Disney Play available on your televisions next year? Look, anybody who wants to sponsor the show...
Disney wishes they could acquire AfterBuzz. That is a lucrative... they want to get in on.
Just think about the topics that we would have. This would be a very magical moment. But in any case, President Trump is like, well, he told me. So that's sort of his go-to. Putin told me that nothing happened in the election, so I believe him. Well, Crown Prince says nothing happened, so I believe him. But then it seemed like there was a little bit more, on his side of the aisle, which is not really an aisle. It's just sort of like, the festival seating where it's just everybody's just kind of standing around.
General
and I think
admission.
it's definitely general admission. Trump's not really on an aisle. He's on an island, perhaps. It's just him and Kanye. But I think there were enough Republicans who were like, yeah, I don't think I like this story. So then not immediately, this takes like 3 days. President Trump's like, there were lies and there were deceptions. And then the question then becomes, Chelsea, was he talking about the Crown Prince, or was he just talking about, that day, earlier that morning for himself?
I think it's similar to after the Parkland shooting when he's like, I don't care what the NRA says, I'm going to ban bump stocks, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. Then in the end, not much has changed, although he said that things are on their way. So I think he might admit, yes, the Saudis did it, and all the way at the top they knew it was happening, or it was per their orders, and yet there's too much money at stake for us. We want to maintain our alliance so that we can control Iran and, and the oil. The oil, of course, the oil.
Yeah, I mean, you could have started and ended with the oil. There's, look, the other stuff, it's some nice change selling arms to the Saudis, but really it's the oil. And I think it's the only way that you're able to, say that a country is one of our dearest friends when you're like, oh, and hey, women, well, they can't drive yet, but they're going to be able to drive in a few months. Like, so really, they're really trying. That's like your friend who's in recovery, and it's like, look, he hasn't had a drink in like 3 days. Come on.
See, here is where I kind of wish, and this is kind of a weird way to say it, in this area is where I wish Trump would be a little bit more nationalist, as in, let's do our own energy, and that doesn't mean more fracking. That means let's harness the power of the energy in the United States so that we can fuel ourselves and be not reliant on these kinds of regimes. I mean, I am for globalism in that we work together, we sell, we trade, that kind of thing. But when it means that we have to literally be in bed with murderous regimes, I am just not cool with that. I would rather figure out a way for us to take care of our energy needs ourselves. And I don't see why the Trump administration isn't on board with that when that could mean so many more jobs. And what they claim is the reason that we can't do away with the arms deals is because it would hurt so many jobs from Boeing and Lockheed and whoever else has all these contracts.
Well, I think it's a very nationalist approach in the one sense that President Trump insists on being bribed in American currency. He has no use. Don't bribe him in euros, if you want him to say something nice about the Crown Prince. Tamra, you hear all this talk about a country like Saudi Arabia. And we've kind of gone through all these reasons why, they're really somehow like one of our nearest and dearest friends. Does that just say how much everybody else in that part of the world just really hates us?
I mean,
except for Israel, but
and everywhere else in the world really hates us. I have to say, I agree with Chelsea about why don't we? I mean, can we? I personally would prefer to be in bed with a murderous wind farm baron rather than an oil baron. Why don't we just get on that board? What was the question?
Just the fact that they really are the Saudis. Look, I mean, they have a crown prince, they have a king. That right there, I mean, sure, England is a good friend of ours, but I would say that at this point, their royal family has less influence than the Kardashians. I don't know that Prince Charles could get someone pardoned, but Kim Kardashian sure can.
The British royal family would have more influence if they had any sort of resource that we needed, the way that the Saudi Arabian royal family does.
Or do you think we have enough smugness? We probably don't need it.
They give us a bountiful resource of photos of Meghan Markle, and that is a resource that one could argue is equally valuable as oil in this country, of the resource of tabloid fodder and baby photos and ideas for baptism out gowns and hats and things like that. That resource certainly is better for the environment than Saudi Arabia's resource, but oh God, what a mess. Can you imagine? Have either of you ever been to the Middle East anywhere?
Nope. The only I know the answer is no. I've been to Morocco, which I understand is Africa, but I mean it's a Muslim country, so that's as far as I ever did. And even that I was like, oh wow, this is not Like, you take a little ferry from Spain to get to Morocco, and it's like, oh, getting on that boat is a lot different than getting off of it. So I don't even.
Wait, explain.
Oh, I mean, I went with a woman, and she wasn't covered, so yeah. So
did that mean you just had to turn around and go back, or you had to go
no?
get
But you just realized that there's it was like 115 degrees or 120, I don't know, because they have that made up Celsius nonsense there, so I don't really know how hot it was. I just know I was sweating.
I haven't been there either, but I've had a lot of friends who have and have told me a lot of things about it, and it strikes me as such an interesting region because of the fact that on one hand it is so extremely conservative in that way, but also on the other hand so extremely lavish, and just like, to me, sounds like another planet as far as just Rolls Royce everywhere, and like malls, just look, every single mall looks like a Crystal Palace, and things like that, where it's just I can't even imagine.
It sounds to me like you're describing La Jolla. It's a whole country.
Is that what La Jolla's like?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's very lavish. There's malls everywhere, and every car is a BMW. In any case, R. Scott Brown in the chat says the royal family cornered the corgi market. That's
yes,
it. And I just had to get that in there. And hello to Bryce Blackwell, who's also in the chat. And of course, Storage Yard resident, who is our real number one fan. Someone else pretends to be our number one fan, but we know Storage Yard residents are really. And we'll move on from this in a moment. But ultimately, Chelsea, and I'll ask you the same question, Tamara. Do you think that there will be like real sanctions or repercussions against the Saudis?
Hope so. Really hope so. I don't know if this is me being way too optimistic again, but I am seeing bipartisan support for sanctions. And dear God, I hope so. If this is the first thing that Congress does that's over Trump's head,
I think you should rephrase that, because over Trump's head would be things that he doesn't understand. So I would say that it's the majority of things in there. And
Sidestepping Trump.
Yeah, they're going behind his back. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for the proper analogy.
Stop naming body parts of his.
Look, I didn't say anything that resembled a mushroom. Yes, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I don't think that they're going to get any sort of repercussions, because not while Trump is in office, because I said this last week, the same thing with meeting with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. There's a contract amongst world leaders to behave a certain way when a country violates, extreme violations of human rights and things like this.
We have a Magnitsky Act. We have something in place that's supposed to be used on leaders that violate human rights. And this is one of those occasions. So it's not like this would be the first time that we would have to do something of this nature. It's just that, are we ready to deal with the consequences that might be against our favor, as in pay more for oil?
And
nope, and we will not do that.
We will not do that. Tamara, you'll sort of appreciate this. A headline that I need to cram in here, basically just so I can go on record and just tell a really easy joke that makes me laugh in my head while I think about it.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
President Trump has said that the Saudi handling of the Khashoggi killing is, quote, the worst cover-up ever. Of course, it is the second worst cover-up ever, second only to whatever that thing is on his head. Thank you very much. Thank you. I wanted to move on. See, now if we had moved on, then it would have really,
ate at you.
Yeah, and I'm like, I really shouldn't go back for it. I would have anyway. That's the beauty of it. Anyway, let us know what you think in the chat. I do think that there will be some strongly worded statements against Saudi Arabia, but they're basically
Trump?
Well, it depends, because I think he wouldn't have even gone as far as he had if it wasn't, whoever his handlers are. I mean, it's not Steve Bannon anymore. I have no idea who he listens to. It's not Jared Kushner. I really don't know who he listens to. It's probably Ivanka, if I had to guess. But just you probably should say something different about the Crown Prince. So I think he will say more. But the direct quote from President Trump: they had a very bad original concept. It was carried out poorly, and the cover-up was one of the worst in the history of cover-up. So only President Trump can go on record and tell you how your organized kidnapping and murder of an American resident, not citizen, but an American resident. Only he's really criticizing that. It's like the murder was really badly done. If Trump had handled the murder, this is him saying Trump in the third person. He'd be like, if Trump had done it, you never would have found him. Believe me. What were you going to say, Tamra?
I know we want to move on from this, but
we don't really want to, but we should.
How is this different from the Russian spy that was poisoned in Britain?
I don't see it as different at all, really. I mean, okay, so this is much more elaborate.
But this is also a journalist, which is...
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so but in terms of carrying it out, it seems like you had more people involved. It was much more organized. You had to have the consulate in Turkey in on it. You're hearing, and look, a lot of it can be hearsay. You're hearing reports that people were told, like, yeah, you can stay home from work today, because they were like, it might get a little messy in the conference room, don't ask. I'm exaggerating the messy in the conference room part. Don't. But people were told to stay home, though, or allegedly.
I think that is the big difference, that it is a journalist, that is yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then, you have to wonder, because now I feel like the Turkish president, he has to really kind of throw his weight around and be like, oh my God, we need answers. But you also feel like, well, there's probably a memo somewhere, and I assume he has a palace. I don't know, countries like that, there's always a palace. There's somebody was like, oh yeah, we're going to do this thing, okay? Because, the Saudis are your friends too. And he's probably like, yeah, it's fine. But now he's just got to be like, oh my God, now that people are finding out about this. I don't understand. I'm not going to criticize the murder as much, but the cover-up is really bad.
You're not going to criticize the murder? It sounds pretty heinous. Because
President Trump is criticizing how it was carried out. I'm not going to criticize how they did that, but thinking that you would get away with it, it's on the level of, the guy who owns the amusement park in Scooby-Doo, thinking that really, if he just pretends to be a ghost, everything's going to work out for him. Just like, okay, we bring the bone saw, we're going to take the guy out in pieces and, some duffel bags.
Because I'm sure they have gotten away with it. You think this is the only guy that this has happened to?
Yes. Because the Saudis are our friends, Tamra. Yeah. So anyway, the Crown Prince...
this is a real opportunity for Americans to figure out for themselves. Are we more into democracy and truth and freedom of speech and freedom of the press, or are we into cheaper oil?
You do know the answer to that.
We know the answer to that.
But you would like the answer to be the opposite. I understand that.
I would like for people to, I don't know, maybe for a second or two struggle with it. You guys sound so...
I'm not struggling with it. I know how I feel. I'm just saying,
know what my personal answer
but
is.
I know what the American people's
answer of
preference
the United
is.
States. Yeah. Why doesn't Elon Musk should abandon his damn tunnel that he's trying to open in the next month right now and put his money in resources into some sort of diverting our dependence on Saudi Arabian oil.
But see, the technology, as I understand it, already exists. It's already available. It's more expensive because when oil and things are, subsidized by the blood of journalists, then they can't be competitive. And so then we stay in that... In oil rather than expanding to other sources.
Depending on how much of a conspiracy theorist you are, there's thinkings. There are thoughts out there that there are designs for say this is more hypothetical. Let's say a car that runs on water, okay, and then obviously those were bought up, and then the person who designed it dies in mysterious circumstances. You hear a lot of this stuff. I don't know if it's true or not, but I do feel like there probably is technology like. I wonder how many more years before, the first Prius was out. Well, could we have had that 20 years earlier?
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Serious question. If we as a panel were going to decide, do you want the Saudi Arabian government held accountable, or do you want to pay $10 a gallon from here on out? Which of those would you choose?
Well, this one is, I might sit out on this one because I drive an electric car, but the electricity prices would still rise.
Yeah,
and
they figured out a way to pass the cost on to you, the consumer. I would say, but
so we're faced with do we let I mean, we're literally controlled by Saudi Arabia, right? We can't stand up to them, can't say anything because of oil. So we choose really democracy and principles and values, freedom, or oil. I mean, I think that we can, for a while, pay more, and then very quickly, the rest of the technology available would become competitive, and it would make economic sense for us to do wind and solar and all sorts of different kinds of alternative energies. It's not just one of them that's a solution. Kind of like how we used to preserve food in with salt. Well, now we have canning, and now we have refrigerators, and now we have, and for better or worse, preservatives.
I mean, speak for yourself. I just salt everything.
There's different ways of doing it, so it's not just one solution. And I think the technology is available for it. And if we just give it a chance and suck it up, and for a while pay more until those technologies become into our infrastructure,
Yeah,
I would vote for that.
Because what would happen is, should let's say in my scenario, their government's held accountable, we lose whatever deal we've got, and our prices go up $10 a gallon, people are going to start using public transportation more, like they did 5 years ago when prices were just up like $1 a gallon. And so then cities are going to have to start to tackle their, focus harder on their transit needs.
I mean, here in Southern California, it got closer to $5 than I've ever seen.
Everything is such a complicated, moving from dependence on fossil fuels into renewable energy is such a complicated issue that there's no way that there's one thing that you can do to make it happen overnight. But an extreme thing that I think could push that is all of the consequences that would fall if we suddenly had to pay $10 a gallon for.
Well, I mean, to that point, if you go over to Europe and you'll see the gasoline prices, first of all, they're in liters, and second of all, the prices are also in euros, so it's more money for a smaller amount of gas, and you realize that that's basically what they have. And of course people have cars there, and of course they use them. Smaller cars, but also, taking the train is much more a way of life. And I'm not just speaking of, like the tube in London, I mean the commuter trains and, sort of the long distance trip. The long distance train trip is more of a way of life. One more comment from our Scott Brown before we move on. Chelsea, America used to stand for something. We used to hold the Constitution up to other countries as an example of democracy and decency. Trump, that's President Trump to you, our Scott Brown, has reduced our nation to a border and a buck. So there you go.
I would agree with that, but then I would have to say that it isn't just Trump, and it's Obama, played into that too. He had arms deals with Saudi Arabia. It goes back a long time. So in all fairness to Trump, it's not just him, but he certainly has an opportunity that I doubt he will take advantage of to hold up the Constitution and be an example of democracy.
Do you think there'll be a Constitution 3 years from now? Or is it going to be one of those things that we talk about?
I mean, I'm afraid to say yes, because I'm going to be too optimistic.
Coming. Serious revolution's coming.
Them some fighting words. I hope it's more of an evolution of consciousness that happens very quickly rather than like a revolution of like death and destruction.
I think over here we're glass half full, half empty over here.
Yeah, and then I just look at the glass and I go like, that glass is going to break. So does it really matter what's in there? All right. So we talked a lot about that. Let's talk about our friends in Russia. I remember when I was a kid, Russia wasn't our friend, but apparently they are now. And an interesting way to do that is President Trump wants to basically tear up this like 30-year-old nuclear arms treaty. And that's how you know that Trump's really getting comfortable in the job. Stuff that Reagan did. Now he's like, yeah, this is garbage. Obviously, I can do better than this.
Can you explain that one to me? Because as far as I understand, this just means it had to do with China and not having nuclear arms go to China. I didn't understand it very well. I'm hoping you could explain it to me.
It's not like a line item thing. You're throwing out the entire treaty. So now you have to sit down with Russia and renegotiate all of whatever your arms dealings are, and what we used to hear all about as kids, and we were terrified of the mutually assured destruction if we ever got into a nuclear war with the mighty Soviet Union, who couldn't keep the lights on, but we were still scared of them. So I think that it's less about what's actually going to happen by throwing out this treaty, then it's more about the two people that would be involved with renegotiating a new treaty. There would be Trump and Putin, or as President Trump calls him, the boss. What do you think, Tamra? I mean, not even worrying about the specifics of this, not that they're not relevant, but it just seems like an opportunity for, basically, if you're a Manchurian Candidate fan, basically it's an opportunity for Putin to just basically turn over the White Queen, and then, now Trump's going to do exactly whatever he wants.
So are you saying this is a calculated move? Like
I think
Putin
so.
wants Trump to throw out the nuclear.
I think that this seems like something that would be important to Putin, because you feel like this was a high priority for Trump and Steve Bannon and Manafort, all the people that have been that are going to do time, all of them. I don't think that this was something that was like, hey, in the first 2 years in office, you really got to get to this.
I miss we haven't gotten a check-in from Robert Mueller lately. I wonder where that's coming along as far as
I think silence is a good sign.
I think he had an appointment at the Turkish embassy to fill out some paperwork. So I hope he's okay. I mean, I don't know. Actually.
I know they subpoenaed Roger Stone yesterday again. But anyway, I don't know. I heard something yesterday that made me a little bit more optimistic about the Mueller investigation when that actually evidence is presented, that we may get to the bottom of this.
I'd like
Russia.
to hear it, because what I read was something like, don't get your hopes up, kids.
Oh, no. It wasn't that there was information that made me optimistic. It was that since we haven't really talked about it, or it hasn't really been in the news lately, the fact that I was like, oh yeah, that's still going on. It just made me think like, oh, maybe after the midterms and we don't retake Congress and I'm going to be so upset. Like, what if there's just this like ray of hope in the distance of maybe Mueller will just be this like ship on the horizon that will be coming in with some sort of...
I don't know. Am I the only one that saw the articles that were like, people don't get your hopes up?
I mean, this sounds like, Tamra, on Halloween night, you're going to be sitting out in the pumpkin patch waiting for Robert Mueller to show up. And, by the way, Scott will certainly be there with you. I'll check in. I'm not going to sit out there, but I'll check in and be like, hey, how's it going? Have you seen him yet? Have you seen the great Mueller, Charlie Brown? This is in case somebody needed me to explain what I was talking about. But, yeah, I don't know. This is one of those things where you just... you hear like, oh, they're renegotiating this treaty with Russia, but don't really pay attention to that. Here's some other stuff that and we talk a lot about that on the show. The sleight of hand, so this thing's gonna happen, but you know what? They're still kneeling at NFL games, and that's really the thing you should be angry about.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think it's a bigger deal than the amount of attention that's being paid to it.
I agree. I think the what is it? The harbinger, the thing that we're supposed to be focused on right now is why the transgender what is it called?
Definition?
Yeah,
is going to be.
We just want to redefine.
Defined out of existence.
The short of that, correct me if I'm wrong, is that whatever you're born with your birth certificate, that's who you are until the day you die, and there's no changing that.
And they want to put federal set in stone law on that, which
What's
is
next?
extremely.
We have to stick with the hair color that we were given at birth. I mean,
well.
Nobody can wear glasses or contact lenses.
Braces are out.
We're just going to be
so far I'm on board with all of this. Especially the hair color thing.
The only reason I mentioned it is not to dive into that issue, because it is extremely important, and I don't want to diminish it in any way. But I feel like that's where everybody, at least amongst everything I've seen, that's where the focus has been this week. And I'm just saying you are correct. I feel like the nuclear treaty is something that we should be more focused on than we actually are.
Well, one of the things I wanted to move on to before we started to run out of time is something that we have touched on before. But again, this is something that seems to come up in the news conveniently now that we're less than a month from Election Day.
As in 2 weeks.
It's like, today's Tuesday. Is it 2 weeks? It's 2 weeks from today, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we'll have an announcement next week as to when you can find us on Election Night. We will be on that Tuesday, but at a special later time to be announced. That's right. You'll have to tune in next week to find out. But these are the sort of things that, when you start to hear like, okay, well, the people might be swinging back our way. So let's frighten them with the migrant caravan of 5,000 people that are basically just, doing like a walkabout.
I contributed to that, by the way. I'm one of the liberal snowflakes that put money in to finance those people coming up here in the caravan. Did you guys hear about that?
No, I did. That somebody has to be paying for them.
People are paying for them.
Wouldn't it make more sense if they were paid for by a Trump-aligned group to stoke fear? I mean, apparently one of the really great social media manipulations done during the election was images of immigrants jumping over the border, and that really got people fired up. Right. Those who are against immigration. And so why not translate that into real life and pay people to come up here and look like they are about to invade us and cause this whole uproar about that. I don't know if that's
well. I think if they're being funded, whoever is funding these 5,000 people is really being stingy with the money because they have to walk. Why haven't you sent a fleet of Greyhound buses there just to bring them to the border faster? Yeah, that too.
I mean, I would join in the laughter of this, but I've heard so many stories of what it's actually like.
They said today, didn't they? The caravan stopped today because there was an accident and some people died from a.
My understanding was that one person died, but maybe that's wrong. But
I missed it. What happened?
Well, they stopped. Everybody stopped moving to sort of honor someone who died, I guess, in an accident as they were moving their way forward.
Was it on the train? Was the train the Bestia?
I just saw the headline.
Oh, okay.
So, we don't really do in-depth
I think it was a car. I think it was a van accident.
We don't deal with depth here.
I don't. Well, I don't. I don't do in-depth,
Although, to say that these people are hardened criminals, not babies, and then actually see real life babies in people's
No, those
arms.
babies are hardened criminals. I think you misunderstood. So they're not just babies; they're hardened criminal babies. Is what President Trump is trying to say. So
he was saying if you don't believe they're hardened criminals, you are a baby.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk about babies this week, actually, and how President Trump is not a baby.
And it's the 20th anniversary of Baby One More Time.
Oh,
just to continue, baby.
And I think it was the 30th anniversary
of when headlines.
Baby Jessica fell down the well. I saw that headline last week. So you see, but Tamra, so talk about not the headlines and the sensationalization, which sounds like a word, of this story. Talk about sort of the reality, the way you understand it. There are these people that are fleeing.
You know what? This is a great opportunity where Chelsea and I never got to talk about the fact that everything about what the United States' responsibility in the fact that these regions are devastated, and we are the reason that these people are moving up here right now. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, then, I remember.
I would love to. I mean, this was months ago, right? That we were talking about this the last time something similar happened, and Tamra was very interested, and I loved it to know what is it that has me and other people saying that this is the United States having to deal with the consequences of its own actions. So she dug around and did her homework, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, saw what I was talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, we have. If we really wanted to resolve the issue of illegal immigration, focusing on the border is neither here nor there, it seems like, until we focus our resources into trying to help to rebuild the
countries that we destroyed, the economies that we destroyed, the roads, the infrastructure that we destroyed, and
to keep people from having to leave their home country. That's the only way that we're ever going to see any sort of real change.
If we wanted to see change, we would help clean up the corruption and the politics of other countries, which might be a little bit weird since ours are a little corrupt.
Honestly, whoever our president is, whoever our president is, whoever's in charge of Congress, there's plenty of corruption, in D.C. I mean, you can point to some extra because of how many friends of the current president seem to be under indictment or in jail or, doing plea bargains and whatnot. But as a foreign country, I don't know how you go, all right, well, Guatemala, Mexico, you guys have to now clean up your act.
I know. know.
Well, you can certainly have a theory, but I don't know what they could actually do. But go ahead. I'm interested to know what you think they could do.
Well, it may or may not have been effective, but there were countries in which we said we're not going to buy the clothing made in basically slave factories. And we could do that for agriculture too, that we can refuse to buy agriculture from countries that we know are companies that are exploiting the workers. So that is one huge thing that we can.
And then that goes back around to the corruption here in Washington, because it's like, whatever that company is, they know, well, here's a few senators that we need to sit down with to make sure that we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
So.
But really, it is one of the biggest reasons why the United States has such an interest in controlling this region is because so much of our food comes from there. And like everything else, we want it to be cheap. Same with Saudi Arabia. We want our oil to be cheap. We want our food to be cheap.
And our drugs to be cheap.
And that's how...
Legal and illegal drugs, by the way.
And that's how we contribute to making the lives of other people miserable, and then wondering why the hell they're trying to escape where they are and come here. And then for people here to act like, oh my God, we are the victims of some coming invasion. We don't deserve this. Go deal with your own problems. It's just so infuriating. The level of ignorance is like, ignorance is like too nice of a word for some of these people saying this. It's just overt, outright stupidity and a refusal to study even the slightest bit of history. I mean, how difficult was it to see what kind of impact and what kind of things we've done in each Central American country? It is not that difficult to see. It is, the CIA used to deny it. They don't deny it anymore. So it just really, really, really ticks me off. And I'm trying to, when people try and play this, this is not our problem. These people need to go back to their country. Shut the door on them. They can deal with their own problems. Leave us alone.
Well, to that point, our friend, Storage Yard Resident, in the chat, as we're talking about this, is saying something that I think a lot of Americans, depending on which poll you look at, a little bit more than half or a little bit less than half, he's saying this is a perfect excuse for build that wall. And that's the solution that I think a lot of people think there is.
How is that a solution?
Well, the swarm that is coming, not to compare humans to insects, but that's what I just did. I don't think you can build the wall fast enough to actually stop it. But
I don't think you can build a wall effective enough. You have no idea what people will do when their very lives are at stake, when their children's lives are at stake. Anybody who believes that building a wall will do it just has no idea what terror and desperation will do to people. It is an animal instinct to survive at all costs, and they will try anything in order to survive or give their children a chance at survival. And a wall, come on, people. A wall is just, they will go under it, they will go around it, they will find ways. And it is just stupid. I mean, why not get to the root of the problem and help resolve the problem in the first place?
Well, much like building the wall, you don't have time to resolve the problem if you do have these people that are moving. And at some point, hypothetically...
Now is as good a time as ever. 20 years was a better time to plant a tree, and the second best time to do it is right now.
Sure, but you're still not going to solve this problem that is, really looming over an election. It's a great motivator to see that, like, hey, are you scared? Well, this is really scary. Look at these people. And then just the reality is, it's a lot of hypotheticals in here, and to some degree I'm playing devil's advocate. What do you do if this many, and that's why I'm keeping hypothetical, if 5,000 or 7,000 people show up at the border? You're not going to let them in at the actual crossings because you wouldn't let anyone in at the crossings.
Well, if they seek asylum, then they would go through the process that we as a country have signed on to, that we are a country that takes asylum seekers.
But they have to do that from Mexico. They don't get to come here and seek asylum,
You
right?
have to come over and ask. You don't get to, you can't stay there and ask for
Right.
it.
Well, when you think about where the border crossings are, there are probably places where they might be a little bit more receptive to you. Like, do you want to cross into Texas?
But here's
or
also
Arizona?
the problem. These people also don't have time to wait for the United States to come solve these problems because the situation has gotten so dire that they have no time to waste either. So if you want to feel bad for the United States, like, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, this is happening right now. Ask yourself the same question about these people that are trying to get over here. What are they supposed to do? If they could stay, I promise you, 90% of them would stay.
And may I ask, storage yard resident, what an illegal immigrant is taking away from him personally right now?
And I assume it's going to be like, oh, my tax dollars are going to go feed this person and provide medical care and, you know.
Well, R. Scott Brown, who's getting multiple shout-outs tonight, says illegal immigrants come for work. Let's adopt the 80s-era Reagan drug policy position on illegal immigration and severely punish those who employ them. Let's punish those addicted to cheap labor. No demand for the cheap labor, no problem. I think there's a kernel in there that I can agree with.
I mean,
I think you'd still have a problem.
Hold accountable the business, because in doing that, that's the only way to put the worker who's just trying to better their life should not be held accountable for just trying to better their life. But if we
it's not even better their life, it's like save their own life.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the reality of what's happening. But yes, sorry, go ahead.
But to hold the actual, business accountable for hiring illegal immigrants, if it is in fact taking jobs away from
which
American citizens,
90% of the time they're
it's
not. These jobs are sitting open with people not wanting to do them because they're gross, like working in animal slaughterhouses or agriculture,
fruit, yeah.
which is really difficult, backbreaking work. So
I guess that what we'll see with this issue is, well, how all in is President Trump going to go to deal with this? Yes, Tamra.
Hold the business accountable the way that Bernie Sanders suggested, in that if any of their illegal employees are on welfare, are getting food subsidies, or get on Medicare, that does not come out of the taxpayer pocket. It comes out of the business's pocket.
yes,
How excited are you that someone brought up Bernie and it wasn't you, Chelsea?
pretty dang excited.
So the idea that, look, this is coming, and you only have 2 weeks to stop it from coming, because if you vote Republican, it won't come. Ignore the fact that these are people who would take office in January or whatever. But do you think, again hypothetical, if it comes to that, like I do, that President Trump would call in the National Guard basically to be like, no, you're not coming through, and the wall's not built. I don't care how much I have to spend in working in conjunction with Border Patrol. I feel like, regardless of what those optics are, I think that he would do something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
And and just as horrific as people would think it is to see, oh my God, the Border Patrol is with the National Guard, and a lot of times when they do that, they'll be like, oh, they're using rubber bullets. Well, just imagine being shot with a rubber bullet, though, and what that would feel like. And you just sort of would have these options. I think that if that happened, Trump would be like, yep, this is what I told people I would give them. This is like, this is a reelect Trump, campaign commercial. I'm showing you that I'm keeping our border safe.
Right. One of the scariest prospects of Trump as president, and even with this, the text message that he sent us all, is this laying the foundation for him causing some sort of some crisis, hopefully not on the order of 9/11, but something of that sort that would scare people so much that they would rally around a strong leader to protect us. And I think this is what he's doing here, is that he is stoking the fears of people, and then he is being their hero. I am the strong person that will save you from them. And so I think that you're absolutely right. And I'm horrified for what's probably going to happen to people.
And just pointing out the fears that he's able to stoke. Is that the word?
Yes.
The people that are the most concerned are the ones that have very few. They're not the people who are living amongst illegal immigrants aren't the ones that are concerned about that. Like, that there's no danger. They're not criminals. They're not any more than the rest of us are.
Sure. Right? Yeah. I mean, to say that there are no illegal immigrants or whatever you want to refer to the group, but of course, yeah. I mean, there might be criminals in this studio. I don't know. I haven't done a background check on either of you, by the way.
I think I sped on the way over here.
Oh, that's right. You've been arrested. So there you go. That's the answer that I was looking for right there. So definitely let us know if you're watching the archived version. And I know I'm trying to have a very even-handed conversation about something that is going on in the world. I don't think I have invoked any hate speech at any point. But if I have, please let me know.
Oh, gosh, let's not invalidate that silliness.
Or validate it.
Validate it, thank you. I'm the one being silly here, getting the wrong words.
Invalidate it.
Yeah.
So as we deal with all of this 2 weeks ahead of the midterm elections, and I hope Scott's able to join us next week, because that 7 days out polling, we could do a whole show on that. The rest of us will sit back and say, hey, Scott, what are the latest numbers? And then before you know it, it'll be 50 minutes later, and I'll be like, good night, everybody.
Yep.
But
we will be schooled and we will be educated by the time he'd be done with us.
President Trump's job approval has reached an all-time high, and there are higher levels of engagement. The interest in the midterm seems to be very high. And something that I talked about a few weeks ago is this notion that people who saw Brett Kavanaugh get confirmed were like, oh, okay, well, then obviously that blue wave is going to be a tsunami because people are so upset by it. But you have to take into consideration the other side who saw what they believe was a good man who had his family dragged through something terrible, and they are just as, if not more engaged. And I think, more engaged than they were before. Absolutely. Oh. Yeah. And they could be more engaged than, the blue wave.
Feel
some
persecuted
people,
by the Me Too movement.
You can definitely say it as an aside like that, but you don't have to sniff around too far on Twitter to find people that, they do feel like, so
I know they exist.
And I at this point, and again, if we had actual hard data, then, Scott could really dive into some of it. Not that I can't read numbers, but I just don't understand them. But the idea of winning the Senate is now just we're really just going to try and minimize our losses in the Senate. I feel like that's changed, not in the last week, but in the last couple weeks. Tamra, do you feel like that's some degree, since we're speaking about waves, that's some degree of a sea change that
I have very little hope that Dems are going to take over the Senate. I'm hoping, I still have a little bit of hope on the House. But,
sure.
I think Beto's numbers are lower than Ted Cruz's. Claire McCaskill.
But within the margin of error.
I mean, but the thing that makes me uncomfortable about it, the thing that makes me uncomfortable about this whole past 2 years is that if Democrats squeak by with a win, it's going to be by such a narrow margin that it's just is that all we can do? The state of the world is still in this place where everything is so narrow.
I've had to battle with myself on that too. Okay, great, we've got political engagement up. That's really exciting. That's my motivation for, doing the show and talking about politics is you don't have to agree with me, but hear out my side and just get involved, whatever you do. And then I'm thinking to myself, great, if everybody gets involved and then we have this, I guess the status quo of right now that remains even after everybody gets involved, I don't know how much loss of faith in humanity and the country I would have, and how deep of a depression that might cause, because I guess in the back of my mind always believed that when people really get engaged and when people really care and when they get really involved, then the good side, the smarter side prevails. And if that doesn't happen, if engagement goes way up and what I believe to be
really
the smarter
changes.
side doesn't prevail, I'm just going to be at a total loss.
Right. If engagement goes up and then it's, a stronger majority in both houses, which, to be fair, the polling is not indicating that, but also the polling was not indicating President Trump. So, I think people are very gun shy with, first of all, believing polls, but what's being reported. I just wonder, that'd be interesting to actually have someone who is a pollster, kind of explain what they're doing differently. And again, midterms are completely different than presidential election, but you have to be doing something different with your data than you were 2 years ago to, have missed the mark that much. And I think that, look, no result would surprise. Well, no, the result that would surprise me is that Democrats win the House and the Senate. I think that would surprise me a lot. But not picking up either wouldn't surprise me at this point.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's such a razor-thin margin. You just need a little bit more engagement in each state that, look, there's a lot of states where you're like, you could all stay home. We could probably just pick the winner in a few of those states. But, and some people would say, like, well, Ted Cruz would be one of those people that, sure, he's vulnerable, but then you go and, run a guy who thinks he should skateboard onto the stage and, you can be like, oh, but that's just one moment.
What do you mean?
Oh, you didn't see that?
No.
He literally skateboarded onto the stage at is it Beto or Beto?
Beto.
Beto, yeah, see. So I wouldn't veto on him. Thank you. I'm not sorry. I really should be, but I'm not. At a rally, he skateboarded on stage. And that, of course, immediately turned into the, what's up, kids? And, you're just like, oh, okay, so...
He had a punk rock band for the last 20 years. Like, that, I don't see that skateboard... Anybody who knows who Beto is shouldn't be surprised by him skateboarding.
Now, if I
on the
skateboarded
stage.
in somewhere, then somebody would be like, okay, that's really,
if
like,
Ted
gross and
Cruz did,
inauthentic.
I feel, if nothing else, that's pretty on brand for him.
Well, I mean... Ted Cruz, flitted in as a bat and then he assumed his human form. We all know how that works. But I'm just, it's such an isolated incident, but that's actually all that matters anymore, is you're able to be like, oh, you want to vote for that guy who was pandering by riding a skateboard? And the thing you said...
Is he pandering, or is that just an expression of who he actually is?
Well, if he did it all the time, sure, but...
You have to do something all the time in order for it to be authentic to you?
I think
don't
it's
know.
just, it goes back to everything now. It does not matter what a candidate does. It does not matter how much Republicans in Texas hate Ted Cruz. It's like, that's my team. I'm sticking with my team. I hate Democrats. I'm not voting for this Beto guy, no matter how charismatic he may be, or how smart he may be, or how much his policies seem to be in line with my own personal best interests. But I know what my team is, and that's not my team. So, I have very little faith that we're going to stray from this narrative anytime soon in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a state like Texas, I think that's not the place where somebody, someone like Ted Cruz could actually, be a senator for the next, well, I was going to say 40 years, but he's not, 20 for sure. It doesn't take much. You just have to say the things that people want to hear and be like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he has our best interest.
The skateboarding thing, is that any worse? I mean, I'd say it's far more damaging than that should be the fact that Ted Cruz's wife complaining that his Senate salary isn't enough, that we're not going to buy a house anytime soon. She said that,
Of his $174,000 a year salary?
Yeah.
Right.
Something like that.
And then you have enough people in Texas who are like, yeah, that's not enough. Absolutely, $174,000.
We need living wages for senators.
Yeah. We should let's do a Kickstarter for not just Ted Cruz, but for everyone in the Senate. They clearly don't make enough when you think about the kind of results that they have. So I think the consensus is nobody's really optimistic that there's going to be, basically there was a headline that I didn't send to the two of you that I saw earlier that was, well, let's manage our expectations on the blue wave is now something that's being said, and the point is made that it's not really a wave. It's just sort of like, just to overextend the metaphor, it's like big splashes in a few places is all that it really takes. But you can look at the map, and if you look at the map from 2016, I wish we still had the one that Scott colored in on election night, but they wanted to throw it away. So I was just like, I'm not taking it home. Anyway, it was too big to fit in my car. You weren't here that night, Tamra. You missed a fun one, by the way, or the opposite of a fun one. But if we had that map, the majority of those of what Scott colored in on election night, you're like, yeah, these are going to be the same, and it really. Like election, it'll come down to 10 states or something probably where you're wondering, who's vulnerable and who's not. So we'll talk more about a lot of that next week. I'll bully Scott into making sure that he's here. But that doesn't sound nice, but really.
We need him.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure you ladies understand numbers and stuff, but I don't.
Scott is really good at putting the numbers into context with history. So that's what I really
it would be
appreciate about his analysis.
Well, 80% say this, and 15% say that, and 5% say that. So what do you think that means? I don't know. So, that's why,
he would put it into historical context, and you'd feel so much
He would look into
smarter.
his crystal ball. Anyway, so we'll really delve into that next week. But as is always the problem here at the Trump Report, we are out of time. So you'll have to tune in next week at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern, and at which time we will tell you when to find us on election night. I have a hunch that I know when it'll be, but we'll let you know next week. But until then, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ, and I have my own personal private podcast. It's not private. It's my personal podcast, the Blattcast, BLADTCAST. We're having our 300th episode on Sunday, so follow me for a link to that. And Chelsea, where do people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
And Tamra.
Hey Tamra _.
And as I said, and S-Man80. He's not here, but he gets the plug anyway. Thanks so much, and we will see you next Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.